"48 more coronavirus cases confirmed, 40 of them local." Tighter controls in place to stop the new spread of COVID, including curbs at eateries and a suspension of school activities. And California reimposes lockdown following spike in COVID cases.
Good evening, welcome to TVB News. The city reported 40 local COVID-19 infections today, more than half of which are untraceable.
Alongside 8 imported cases from India, the UK, and the Philippines, they bring the city's total infection tally to 1,567. Jackie Lynn begins our coverage.
It's been about a week since the surge of new cases began appearing, but the third wave shows no signs of slowing down. And Shan remains the hardest hit neighborhood. At least 16 new infections emerged from the district's infection clusters related to restaurants. The virus-stricken care home nearby also reported 1 more resident coming down with COVID-19. That's on top of a number of infections from several housing estates in the area. The virus also reared its ugly head in nearby districts, namely Choi Hong, Ngao Chiwan, and Lok Fu. Most new cases there have unknown origins, with a number related to wet markets. Other districts with new cases include Tuen Mun, Yuen Long, and Kwai Chung North.
Many of the cases are elderly people. They do not have many activities except walk around in some and have Chinese tea. If that is the risk factor, then it is very worrying because many of us may get infected unknowingly.
Another worrying front is hospitals.
We are facing the challenge of increasing infection control measures in the hospital.
This comes after a patient tested positive for COVID-19 at Princess Margaret Hospital shortly after undergoing a heart operation on Thursday. At Queen Elizabeth Hospital, too, a patient who stayed in the same ward as a COVID patient was confirmed to be infected. That patient also stayed at Hong Kong Buddhist Hospital. Their wardmates and a nurse are under medical surveillance. Meanwhile, 1 more immigration department staff member has come down with the virus. The daughter of his infected colleague has also preliminarily tested positive. Jackie Lynn, TVB News.
Well, meanwhile, stricter social distancing measures will take effect tomorrow.
As Natalie Kynes reports, some caterers are facing new challenges due to the restrictions.
Gatherings like this one at a dim sum restaurant in Mong Kok will not be possible starting tomorrow. There should be no more than 4 people per table, and only half of the tables in the premises can be filled. The ban on dine-in services between 6 p.m. and 5 a.m. is prompting some restaurants to offer delivery services, but this restaurant owner will close early instead because the overhead charges are too much.
After discussing with our staff, we all agreed to stop business at night, and every day we'll close before 6 o'clock. They are willing to have no pay leave to help the restaurant because we are good colleagues for so many years. Some work for us for more than 20 years.
This caterer explains providing delivery services is easier said than done.
By the traditional way, we have to hire someone who do the delivery service, which is different from the staff we are using now. So if we use the delivery apps, they are charging us quite a service charge as well. 30%. Yes, maybe they rip us off about like 15% at least.
The restrictions are also forcing the closure of 12 other types of venues, including gyms, bars, and beauty parlors for a week. Subsidies from the Anti-Epidemic Fund are supposed to help affected businesses stay afloat.
I think it will be a serious damage for the industry because we not yet recovered from the last closing period. And also many beauty salon owners still not yet received the subsidy from the last closing period. So we hope government can speed up the process.
Masks are mandatory on public transport from midnight to night. Passengers who refuse to wear one will not be allowed to get on and may end up with a fine of up to $5,000. Natalie Kynes, TVB News.
The Education Bureau announced more containment measures today. in light of the growing outbreak of COVID-19.
They include wrapping up exams as soon as possible, as well as stopping all other on-campus activities. Caleb Leung has that story.
After deciding to commence the summer vacation early on July 13th, the Education Bureau introduced more anti-epidemic arrangements today. This time, the Bureau is asking schools to complete all exams soon. This applies to all secondary and primary schools, kindergartens, special schools, as well as tutoring centers, which are now required to finish their exams within 2 to 3 days as far as possible. Tests can only be held at half-day schedules. Schools are required to take adequate health protection measures, such as maintaining adequate separation between seats. Furthermore, schools are also ordered to suspend all on-campus activities for 2 weeks, including makeup classes and extracurricular activities at all levels. The arrangement will commence tomorrow, which means it will be in effect from July 15th to July 28th. Unless absolutely necessary, students should not go back to school. The epidemic has also affected arrangements for the pre-secondary One Hong Kong attainment test. A total of 157 secondary schools decided not to conduct the test, while 253 others went ahead and held it today. This after schools were given the choice on whether to conduct the test or not, as this year's results will not be used as a scaling tool in the secondary school places allocation system. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
Well, meanwhile, the government will provide free tests for those in the high-risk categories.
With the help of 1 local and 2 mainland laboratories, the government expects over 400,000 people to be tested.
Those considered in high-risk clusters include care home staff, taxi drivers, as well as staff from property management and those who work at eateries. Yesterday evening, the chief executive talked about the arrangements for getting tests.
We managed, with the support of especially the Shenzhen municipal government, to sort of help us or even send the experts to us to secure this latest test provider, which has been doing huge amount of tests in various mainland cities and even in overseas countries. The other test provider has been operating in Macau, and we are also discussing with them for a while.
The first firm said to be helping with the tests is a Hong Kong-based DNA laboratory, Prenetics, which had introduced virus tests for home use with local universities before. The other 2 private laboratories are from the mainland. One of them is BGI Genomics, a genome sequencing company which had its research center set up in Hong Kong 10 years ago. The last one is China Certification and Inspection Group, which has provided tests for over 100,000 people in Macau since May. Pro-establishment lawmaker Ben Chan believes the 2 mainland firms are very experienced, so there's no need to question their abilities. But Pan-Democrat Kwok Ka-ki worries the DNA of 400,000 people will be passed on to the mainland. He adds the government is not really giving local labs a chance to help, given a majority are mainland-based.
COVID-19 cases in the U.S. continue to spike, with California going under a new lockdown to stem the spread of the virus.
Well, the top U.S. infectious disease expert, Anthony Fauci, believes there could be a vaccine by the end of the year. Leslie Tang has more.
California businesses are taking a hit as the state's governor has ordered another sweeping shutdown. It includes closing indoor operations such as gyms, beauty parlors, bars, and indoor dining. The move is an attempt to flatten the recent spike in COVID-19 cases in the U.S.'s most populous state, which is reporting more than 8,000 new infections on a daily basis.
One thing I just think is incredibly important to remind all of you is that this virus is not going away anytime soon. I hope all of us recognize that if we're still connected to some notion that somehow when it gets warm, it's going to go away, or somehow it's going to take summer months or weekends off, this virus has done neither.
Meanwhile, Florida reported a whopping 12,000 new cases Monday, following a weekend when it set a national record with 15,000 cases on Sunday. Its governor said that's partly due to a large number of tests being carried out. Over in New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo said the New York State Health Department will be issuing an emergency health order. It will require all travelers from states impacted by spikes of the virus to provide a location form and quarantine.
If you leave the airport without filling out the information, not only can you have a $2,000 fine, you can then be brought to a hearing and ordered to complete mandatory quarantine.
Meanwhile, the White House's top infectious disease expert is striking a hopeful note amid the gloom.
Vaccine, as you know, there are multiple candidates that are in various stages of clinical trial. One or two of them will go into phase 3 for efficacy literally at the end of this month. So we're pretty cautiously optimistic that at the end of the year, beginning of this coming 2021, we will have one and maybe more, I hope more than one vaccine that would be available.
Leslie Tang, TVB News.
The head of the World Health Organization is slamming government leaders for eroding public trust by sending out conflicting messages on the coronavirus.
Let me be blunt. Too many countries are headed in the wrong direction. The virus remains public enemy number one. But the actions of many governments and people do not reflect of this. The only aim of the virus is to find people to infect. Mixed messages from leaders are undermining the most critical ingredient of any response: trust.
Tedros did not call out specific politicians or for criticism, but he said without applying basic outbreak control methods, the pandemic is only going to get worse. His remarks came a day after the WHO reported yet another worldwide record of more than 230,000 new cases in 24 hours. More than half of the new confirmed cases are from the United States and Brazil.
China's exports rose unexpectedly in June, a sign that the economy is gradually recovering from the coronavirus pandemic. Exports were up 0.5% last month on an annual basis, compared with a 3.3% decline in May. Analysts were expecting a 1.5% drop in June. Exports to the U.S. rose 10.6%. Also defying expectations, imports were up 2.7% when a 10% drop had been expected. It's the first time imports grew this year, reinforcing views that the recovery from the pandemic is gaining traction. They had fallen 16.7% in May. The data points to a slow clawback from the sharp 6.8% contraction in the first quarter. Still to come on tonight's news. Liaison Office calls pan-Democrat primaries an affront to national security. Japan defense paper highlights the challenge from China, while U.S. declares Beijing's claims in South China Sea unlawful. And body of Glee actress who went missing in the lake is found.
Welcome back to TVB News. The Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office is calling the pro-democracy camp's primary elections over the weekend a blatant challenge to national security and illegal manipulation of an election in Hong Kong.
This is exacerbating fears over how far-reaching the security law could be. Haley Joe has more.
The State Council's Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office says the pan-Democrats' primary elections held over the weekend is a serious challenge to national security. It said in a statement that it's not an isolated incident, but continuation of the anti-extradition bill movement, and its goal is to seize power and overthrow the Hong Kong government. It singled out HKU law professor Benny Tai, who organized the primaries, as a main instigator. This came a day after Beijing's liaison office in Hong Kong issued a similar statement saying the primary elections have seriously undermined fair electoral elections. It also claimed the polls were supported by foreign forces. Colluding with foreign forces to rig or undermine an election is an offense punishable by up to 10 years in jail under the national security law. The primaries drew more than 600,000 voters to the polls, in which young Democrats or localists new to politics had a strong showing.
A lot of people think that they might want to have a electoral member who can be more confrontational. Maybe we cannot ensure that we can get what we want, but at least they can release some of their emotions.
The government is looking into whether anyone violated any laws during the primaries. It said the organizers vowed to reject the government's budget after achieving a majority at LegCo may constitute an offense of subversion. Haley Zhou, TVB News.
Overseas, Japan says China is using the coronavirus pandemic to push harder on territorial claims in the regional seas and expand its influence.
The assessments are contained in new government defense reports that conclude China's strategic ambitions continue to pose a growing threat to the entire region. The Defense White Paper 2020 highlights potential Chinese and North Korean threats as Japan tries to further increase its defense capability. The annual review, which was approved by Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's government today, accuses China of pushing its territorial claims while its regional neighbors are distracted by the coronavirus pandemic. Defense Minister Taro Kono says experts suspect Beijing is spreading propaganda and disinformation as it provides medical aid to nations battling the disease. The White Paper described relentless intrusions in waters around a group of small islands claimed by both nations in the East China Sea. In the South China Sea, the White Paper says Beijing is asserting territorial claims by establishing administrative districts around disputed islands. The report comes less than a day after the Trump administration rejected outright nearly all of Beijing's significant maritime claims in the South China Sea. Today, Japan's chief cabinet secretary expressed support for the U.S. position and praised the move as an unwavering commitment by the U.S. to the region's peace and stability. Previously, U.S. policy had been to insist that maritime disputes between China and its smaller neighbors be resolved peacefully through UN-backed arbitration. In Beijing, the foreign ministry said China has lodged a complaint over the Japanese review, claiming it's full of biases and false information. At the White House, meanwhile, another warning to Beijing that the U.S. will hold China accountable for a number of things.
There's been a tremendous sea change in attitudes about China after this pandemic. I mean, their behavior during the Chinese flu was not good, and I hear it and talk to my counterparts in Europe, Britain, Japan. We will be talking about this at the G7 meeting at the end of next month.
The Trump administration is moving ahead with the execution of the first federal prison inmate in 17 years after a divided Supreme Court ruled federal executions could proceed. Daniel Lewis Lee, who killed a family in Arkansas in 1996, is scheduled to receive a lethal dose of a sedative later today. Federal executions were put on hold in 2014 after a botched execution in Oklahoma.
The Justice Department has undergone this review to look at death penalty procedures and try to figure out if the policies that were in place were the right policies that were in place, and they did a review of the drugs that were going to be used in the executions. They've since changed the drug cocktail from 3 drugs to now 1 drug.
U.S. President Donald Trump's executive clemency for his longtime advisor Roger Stone not only commuted his prison term, but also spared him a hefty fine and 2 years of supervised release. The details of arrangement were made public after a federal judge demanded to be provided with a copy of the executive order. Trump claims he is being praised for commuting Stone.
I'm getting rave reviews for what I did for Roger Stone, and he frankly is going to go and now appeal his case. He had a jury forewoman who hated Roger Stone and who hated probably me, but she went on a false pretense, and he wasn't given a fair trial. It's not a fair trial. He wasn't given another trial. Should have been given another trial.
After days of searching, TV star Naya Rivera has been found dead in a Southern California lake. Rivera, who was 33, shot to fame on the hit TV show Glee. Her body was discovered 5 days after she went missing during a boating trip with her 4-year-old son. Her son was found alone on a boat the two had rented on Lake Peru. The boat's vendor found the vessel drifting in the lake with the boy asleep on board. He told investigators he and his mother went swimming, but that she didn't get back onto the boat. It's believed Rivera drowned. She is the third major cast member of Glee to die. And that is the news for tonight. Thanks for watching.
Good night.